Uh, we have a short agenda. John Cheek has said he cannot be here. He's traveling. Uh, but just quickly, we have a variety of agenda items. Um, Starting off with just introductions, and I think Matt Banks is going to join us, and when she does, we'll introduce her. Uh, I have visited quite a number of the sites, and I just want to talk briefly through some of my site visits, and then introduce Morgan Atkinson, who is making a video, and we've met with CORE and public relations folks, and it seems to be going on. John has done some work on mapping, and wanted to talk through that a little bit. And if Mark is on the call, talk about property ownership, and then just briefly sort of talk through this, what's upcoming, the purpose of this committee, and trying to get together something by the fall of 2021. And so that's our agenda. I wanted to sort of give a shout out to Bob and to John, but he's not here, for the navigation webinar. I thought it went well. Any comments about it?
I didn't see it, David. Will we have access to that anywhere?
Yeah, it's up on the ORRT's webpage already, and I'll send a link to everybody. And we have it in process with Harry to have them put up those. But
okay, great.
We had about 100 people, fascinating 3 presentations on sort of the, they say it was the past, present, and future, but it was really the past and the present. And not too much discussion about the future. Anything else about that? Let's see if I can do this here. And I did have one of my jobs that I said I was going to do with for this committee was to talk to people who are managing some of the facilities up and down the area. So we did this. Lock House number 51 in Golconda, Illinois, just a beautiful place. It's run by a not-for-profit associated with the city there. And for $75, you get to stay in one of the 3 cabins up here. Their board is made up of 2 folks in their 80s who are dedicated to the properties, and they also run the history museum there. Interestingly, when we were there, went to a restaurant, and the woman who owns the restaurant grew up in these houses. Her dad was the lock master, and it was just a fascinating place. We could go on and on and on, and so I have a list of all of the projects. We met with them for about an hour the night, one of the evenings. We drove back up and stopped in Newburgh, and I thought there was only one lock house that was available for sleeping and for rental, but I was wrong. Newburgh, Indiana has a beautiful facility, 2 lock houses, and incredibly well maintained, just state of the art, all with antique furniture, and it's within a bicycle trail to some fascinating, beautiful downtown, and they have an event space that they rent out for weddings and stuff like that. These guys here are just sort of a series of them. I drove really from Pittsburgh down to the Mississippi over the past month with my wife. This place here is for sale. It's a mile 36, Lock House 7. Interesting piece with this is the surrounding 150 acres is already a park, but it is right downstream from a nuclear power plant, and sort of an interesting sort of venue. The next one I visited was down Lock House 15. No Lock House anymore, but the pavilion's still there, or they have a nice pavilion and some history. but a great boat ramp and going on down. Then Lock House 16 is in private hands. The neighbor, the guy never really used it that often, and probably will be for sale at some time soon. Lock House 22, fascinating museum, Ravenswood, West Virginia, and it's really it's called Washington's Land, and it's dedicated on, it's focused on our first president, but also Lock House and how it ran. Then Lock House 32 in Vanceburg is controlled by the Lewis County Schools, but it's in terrible repair. They use it as a bus parking lot right now. They have about 80 acres, but they mow the whole thing and picnic tables, and so it's all set up, but a bit vandalized. Then the Chyler Visitor Center, met with them, and they're in a bit of a trouble. They have a little bit of a staff, and they've consolidated their staff now back up to the northern part of their county. And so to do programs here is an hour drive for them. And so they're still not sure what they're doing. Then, of course, Chris and Thomas More, and we can talk about them forever. It's just a beautiful place. Then coming on down, this place is for sale in Cold Spring. It's right upstream of Cincinnati, sort of that northern Kentucky branch. The two homes are in very good shape, and the Lock House is okay. Then we skip all the way down to below Louisville, and this is in Leavenworth, Indiana. And Leavenworth has an interesting deal that it is the second largest town in the history of the United States to be moved by the federal government. And voila, they left the Lock House, and this is actually now a historic park run by the county, but they don't have the money to maintain the building. Let's see, the next one down, then we had the other one to Newburgh and the other one, and I had the great privilege of going to Lock 52 on one of the last days that they were dismantling it. You can sort of see all of these lock houses right down here in the bottom. When they finished Olmsted, the Corps made a decision to remove all of the lock houses, and I got to talk to the superintendent of the manager of the contractor who's removing all of it, and they're saying it's just a total chore. They are going to leave the steps, but he wasn't sure what the future use of it was, but it would be an ideal camping ground. And then, well, I went the wrong way. That's it. So that's so when we went up and down, I had this impression that there were only 4 or 5 that were publicly accessible. It turns out that there's 12 and spread over 10 pools. And so I just found it fascinating. And so, and one of the things I did was to sort of write up what people said about each one of their needs. So one of my suggestions for this group is one of our recommendations that come out of it is to help those institutions with their long-term maintenance and programmatic needs, and to develop a piece. So if we do have a network of stations up and down, the long-term issue for many, many places is that sustainability. The folks down in Golconda basically said, they got a grant 22 years ago. They built it and restored it, and they've tried to maintain it. All the equipment's 22, 23 years old. So that's just my my report. And any thoughts, any questions?
First of all, it's really interesting to see, David. I can imagine you and your wife had a good time doing that. And secondly, the number of accessible lock houses or sites is surprising to me, so that's encouraging. The variety of architecture is cool. You know, some similarities, but also some really unique differences. But it just, looking at that brief snapshot is, I think, is encouraging and exciting and would get potential donors interested. I think that's something that you could, or we could, shape into a grant teaser or some sort of fundraising piece.
Well, I think that's the intent, and my initial audience really is this Ohio River Basin Plan, that, you know, if it really does get funded, this should be one of the components of it, the development of this. Now, will that be a separate grant, or I'm still not exactly sure how the final product will look from this Ohio River Basin Plan initiative, but there's another guy who's now moved to Vive or VV, and he happens to be a retired U.S. Department of Interior Historic Preservation Director. So for 20 years, he directed all of the historic preservation programs for the U.S. Department of Interior. And he's interested in this as well. So there's a variety of pathways forward. And the challenge is to, you know, there's still 20 that I haven't visited. So, you know, there might be 15, you know, and that's one thing that I think John's work is going to be fascinating with that.
And are you willing to submit an abstract and present at the ORBA-ORCRE meeting?
Oh, for sure. We certainly will, and I'll try to have more background information and start that collection of need. You know, and that's one of the questions I have for the Army Corps, which I wish Mark was here, or we didn't really do introductions. We just jumped right in. We've lost even, looked like Bob was online. But the Corps, through a PAS project, do a needs assessment for all these partners they have that run historic lock houses, and to come in to get an engineer, and, you know, to partner with each person to say, what are the needs to maintain these facilities in the long term? And maybe you know what the cost is for yours, but certainly the folks down in Golconda, or the folks in Vanceburg, you know, they just say it's a lot. So that, anyway, that's piece. Morgan's here, and so the next item on the agenda really is this Ohio River PBS KET documentary. And so, Morgan, what are your thoughts, and what can we do to help right now?
Well, I'm getting help from all the people in attendance. You know, I'm still in just research mode, where I'm trying to find the stories that I think will best express what we're trying to express. And so I don't have much to show for it. It's all inside my head at this time. And that can be a scary place, but moving forward. And next week, I'm going to talk with John about architecture of the houses, and I'm going up to see Chris the week after that, and talking to Nancy Stearns Thies, who's just written a book about, among other things, how the Ohio played such a role in the Underground Railroad. So just exploring in that way. And well, I hope it's a PBS KET documentary, but I think at this stage we can't guarantee that.
Okay, perspective.
Yeah.
Now you should take your wife down to Newburgh, Indiana. They have a wonderful Mediterranean restaurant right there that's just walking distance from this lock house. And it's just a beautiful place to stay. They have a nice little pavilion that they have music. And then you could ride a bicycle to this place that is probably one of the most interesting Indian sort of restored villages run by the National Park Service called Angel Mound. And so all right there in Newburgh, Indiana. And so if one's looking at the ultimate in luxury in relationship to lock houses, that's the weekend.
Okay. I will follow up on that.
Now here's a thought, Chris. Morgan dream is to create a 3 to 5 minute promotional teaser for the video that will eventually be used for fundraising to do the whole thing. And he did share the link of the video from the woman from Brazil, or who lives in Brazil now on the Ohio River. And you were going to show part of that at the conference. How could this promotional trailer that Morgan's putting together, could that be shown at the same time or a different time?
Yeah, definitely open and definitely think it can happen. As far as Abby's documentary, to which you referenced, that's TBD, to be determined based upon her ability to get something presentable to this audience. I'm supportive of her work. Morgan has talked to her several times, but she doesn't have a product that would be appropriate to share at this point to kind of give an audience an idea of what she has. If she does, I plan to show it before a general session. So before a plenary talk, or before, when we're all in a room, we have the projector show a 3 to 5 minute video to promote that as support of their work. So that's something, if Morgan has something he's willing, it might be premature, but if he's willing and comfortable, we can definitely fit that in.
Yeah, and I think for sure we'll have something by then. And the only thing I would not want to do is step on what Abby is doing, because she's been at it hard a lot longer than I have on this project. So
yeah, and I don't think they're really they're not mutually exclusive. We always do introductions and housekeeping items before every sort of general session. We just carve out 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah,
to
they're very different approaches to the program.
And we would do them at different times so that we're not going to run 2 back to back.
Okay.
Like, here's one here, here's one there. And I hope she gets something together. I'm not sure if that'll transpire, but if so, we're certainly want to support.
Yeah, she has some great elements in that piece.
Yeah, it's a very different film piece, but again, we would love to support it.
Yeah.
Wanted to talk about John then. John, do you want to share your screen, John, to should us talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, let me do that. I also want to share a link in the chat. Let me do that first. What I've done is I'm sharing a link to a Google map. This should work on your computer. I don't think it works too well on a cell phone. But what this Google map is, it's just at a starting point, locating all of the original locks and dam structures on the river. And that's really from Pittsburgh to Cairo. Let me share my screen as well. I'll just kind of give you a quick overview of this. I'm gonna have trouble sharing my screen, but that's okay. If you don't mind, take a look at the chat and go to the link, and you should be able to see it okay. So what I've done just for a starting point, thanks, David. I appreciate that. For a starting point, you'll see a lot of red pins, and those are all the existing lock and dams sites, or those are all the original sites. There's blue pins as well. The blue pins are the current, like kind of the larger current like lock and dam structures on the river. So those kind of delineate different pools along the river. And within those, there's, you know, I don't know, on average, like maybe 3 or 4 different lock house sites. The frequency of the original sites was a lot more than the current sites. But what's nice about this is it gives us all just a kind of a common map of locating where these sites were. I was able to actually connect with John, who gave me like a 1935 book with hand-drawn maps, and it had all of these kind of located on them. So this is kind of translating that 1935 book onto Google, which at least gives us the locations. My next step in this is really to kind of start to layer in another set of information, which is what is the status of some of these sites? Are there, let's say, better sites and worse sites in terms of like possible candidates to target as you know, potential sites to be addressed by this committee. So you know, some of them are completely demolished and they're just wildlife areas or parks. David's survey, the photo survey he shared just before this, was, I think, on point. It gave a good ground level view of what you're seeing here, which is more of an aerial view. But I'm going to continue to kind of work with this data and just see what I can get out of it. I definitely want to, I've just located them, so I need to kind of evaluate from here.
I just find it interesting that the Army Corps, you know, here it's an official committee, and here they built all these things. And what do they have in terms of geographic information on where they are? Is a 1936 hand-drawn map in a book. So we don't have the proper people on the core property version, I guess, on the committee, or the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. I think that'd be fascinating to really look through there, John, and to, you know, see which one's vacant, which one's public access, which one's, you know, a private house, and somehow designate that. I did have a conversation with John Cheek, and he thought the idea of trying to have a publicly accessible, research-oriented, educationally oriented lock house per pool would be an achievable goal. And so something like this really, so when we look at here, you know, and so there might be one pool, you know, and so it's you know, so which one of these really would be the ideal? You know, this one here is run by the schools already, and so if we can get the Corps to commit to supporting one per pool, you know, or maybe as you go up towards Pittsburgh, they get pretty close, you know, so you need one per pool up in Pittsburgh. I don't know, but
yeah, well, there's so many variables too. It's like, you know, which ones are close to population centers, or which ones are in, let's say, like black hole areas where the river is not as accessible. I would say there's like different maybe parameters that maybe help us decide, you know, what's worth pursuing. But anyway, it's good. Just as a starting point, I think it's good to just have them all on a single map.
No, I really like it because I talk about all the old dams and just seeing exactly the density and the layout locations. That's really useful. I could use it for my classes in a lot of different ways. So see, it really helps give us a big perspective. And then along with David's photos, you could really build a really good layer and story. And I was thinking about name that, a unique name that would kind of capture all of this in a way that is easy to say and attracts attention. Some sort of acronym.
Oh yeah. Hmm. You mean just for this, let's say, project of drawing attention to the lock houses?
Now,
Right.
John, during your class, when you looked at Pittsburgh down to Cincinnati, you did that layer of vacant and not vacant.
Yes.
And
yes.
you had a term on there, and I'll have to, was it reinvigorating infrastructure, or there was a piece about infrastructure in there. Do you remember?
We had called something aging infrastructure.
Aging infrastructure.
Um,
It's sort of a interesting play on words, but it's also about public access. It's a fascinating thing. Well, do you need any
yeah,
more help?
also,
Do you need any
I
other
was just,
data or to continue on?
no, I think I've got what I need to continue with it. I think just a couple of quick thoughts. I think maybe what our class got most excited about was just the density of how many sites there are here, and if there was a smart ecological approach to actually kind of repurposing these sites as some kind of ecological benefit to the river, just because of the quantity of sites. But we're just architects and designers. We're not the scientists, so I don't know. We were a bit naive on it, I think, but we were interested in everything from the harmful algae blooms to mussels. I know, Chris, you helped one of my students out with a nice email, maybe over the winter or early spring. But so I think, like, to me, what's most exciting is maybe some kind of like combination of ecology and art, or some kind of like either history and culture, or some, I don't know, broad potential uses. But there's so many of these sites. So
Yeah, there is some, right off the top of my head, there's certainly some ecological consequences of preserving the lands along the riparian zone, but more so, or for sure, in addition, is the environmental impact they can have. So I envision these sites also having sensors that we can monitor, because we have gaps in the river, and that's always a need among the scientific community, is what's going on at different spots of the river are really black holes. And so having public access and safety, security, where we can invest in a $15,000, $20,000 piece of equipment and feel confident that it's going to be there and we can get access to it. So from an environmental standpoint, these would serve a purpose, multi-purposes, as you mentioned and others have mentioned, but it would certainly help in our eyes on the river. The other aspect, so real quick, the other aspect is because they're situated in different parts, like you mentioned, urban areas, rural areas, there's a cultural piece to this all too. So we mentioned the cultural piece, and also increasing access to the river, bringing new audiences, the whole diversity, inclusion, accessibility piece. I think we can also go after money and really make a positive impact on bringing more people to the river that otherwise wouldn't. They don't have boats, they don't have property, they don't have easy ways to get to the river. And so I think we should also promote it in that regard as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to even just at a satellite view see some of the differences in the sites up in Pittsburgh versus, you know, down in Louisville or further towards Illinois. Um, yeah, I imagine that the local towns that these are built like on the peripheries of, um, you know, they all have their own identities and they all have their own maybe like requirements or needs. And those kind of might rub off on these sites as well. So they're kind of like this regional typology that's 1,000 miles long, but they all have kind of individual maybe requirements of each site. You know, the site at Chilo might offer something that the site up in Pittsburgh doesn't need. So
You
I
know,
don't
that's
know.
a fascinating topic for a student project of yours, is to really help those towns think about the long-term sustainability nature of maintaining a building like this. You know, because once the core gets rid of it, it's theirs, you know, it's just, so it has to have a model that is just, that can be maintained over 20, 30 years. And each place is different, it seems. And is there synergism to raising money for a 1,000-mile citizen science research thing focused on our river? Is it, you know, my fascination is if it's ever possible to get all 52 sites, which I'm not sure if it's ever possible, but
I don't know.
uh, uh, just imagine having a camping spot every 20 miles
Yeah.
with facilities right there. It'd be the longest recreation trail that's supported like that. You know, you go up to the Appalachian Mountain Club and you go hiking from, you know, clubhouse to clubhouse. They have that out in Colorado also. So, you know, all of a sudden you'd have this linkage. So if you wanted to go bicycling or paddling, you'd have a spot that goes with. There's a young man who's going to be coming up to you pretty soon, Chris, Mr. Neil, or Neil, I'll get his name. And anyway, he's paddling from the Pacific Ocean to New York City. And he has a deal in Ludlow at the circus on July 2nd. So he has a big presentation there. So Paul is sponsoring him. But that's my dream. Well, that's great. Any other comments for John, or do you have any other thoughts? I think figuring out a way to layer all those layers into that would just be great. I just wanted to, sort of this property ownership, Mark is not here. We're still having a couple issues with property ownership. Mansburg, even though Lewis County Schools think they own it, they can't find any paperwork that it ever got transferred to them. And so it's just, I'm working through that with Mark. This Ohio River Basin report, from my understanding, we're going to use the Ohio River Conference as our draft opportunity to share our strategies that we would like to be included into the report, which is, that means by October 5th, we have a pretty good idea of what we want to recommend to do for these pieces, you know. So it's not necessarily having a full-blown report or a full-blown grant application, but it's the concept and a ballpark figure. And so I have included 3 ideas right now that I've heard of, and we will sort of, this idea of work to have one functionally publicly accessible lock house per pool that could be used for a variety of purposes: river education, research, citizen science, safety courses, river access, lodging, camping, whatever, or an event space. But sort of that notion of our goal is 1 per pool. The second one I heard is just helping the existing lockhouse owners maintain their historic structures and develop river-wide programs. The people down in Golconda know anything about the other lock houses up, you know? It was sort of interesting. It, they'd love to get some programmatic support. And then the third one is really disengage the public through media and a coordinated set of programs and exhibits, you know, that could help promote a coalition. So I'm going to send these around. I don't expect anybody to sort of react to them right now, but I'm going to send them around and start to think through this, because we then, if these are our 3 actions we want to undertake, you know, there's lots of little pieces underneath it, you know. Do we need to get an engineering perspective of each blockhouse? On and on and on. Any thoughts for these?
For B, I have a quick thought on B. Help existing lock owners maintain the structures. You know, I wonder if I can envision some kind of fund or something, or some kind of grant money that is like a big, you know, a collective pot that any local community could, let's say, apply for if they need support for maintenance, or if they're trying to repurpose one of these. But I could see it being, you know, between the, you know, how many, you know, lock houses there are on the river, maybe there's some sort of system that, you know, local communities could maybe apply for assistance.
Oh, no, I think it's all about money. The CNO Canal, which is my little Seth Wheat, who is our director of tourism for the state of Kentucky, he turned me on to the CNO Historic Canal, and they have provided about $40 million in grants to help restore the lock houses along the CNO Canal. And so now they have 7 bed and breakfasts that are operational and several other in the works. And so I think something like this is, we'd have to come up with a number and say, you know, yeah, it's $6 million annually that we need to support these lock houses. It's, well, you know, whatever that number is. My wife says, don't be greedy, but Perry Stone says, ask what you need for, you know, figure out the need. And because if you take a place like Vanceburg, it could be significant money to restore that building.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of the others as well. I mean, yeah.
Or Parkersburg, you know. I spent some time up in Parkersburg, and you know, they became a national water trail this past summer. The 40 miles around Parkersburg, and Mr. Lewis up there he's very interested in helping restore that lock house up there and how it could fit into their. He's interested in high school research. You know, it's money, as you know, Chris. It's rebuilding this stuff is not cheap, but hey, if you can build a $1.4 billion Homestead Dam, you can afford $6 million to have a public outreach program.
Yeah, I think these are great starters, and we can wordsmith a little bit. One suggestion I have right now is, instead of just the word lock house sites, because if there isn't a lock house there, you could still develop the site. So particularly in the first one, work to have one functionally former lock house site, and that doesn't put the onus just on that building. You know, yeah, it just broadens it and it gives more flexibility.
No, there's several campgrounds that they've, well, 52 and 53 that's what that's going to be. You know, they've dismantled the building, gave away all the stuff, so it's not there anymore.
Yeah, and then develop number 2, river related programs. Like, you know, river wide program would be daunting to me. I can develop a program on the river, but just river related programs. You
know, and my interest is to use your expertise there, Chris. So if people in the lower end of the pool wanted to think about the Ohio River in general, and that's what I meant river wide. Is there some common threads that everybody who visits one of these lock houses should walk away with.
Yeah.
Uh,
And that's the nature of this river that is such diversity depending on where you are, both in water quality, the community of fish or the community of organisms, the physical dimensions. And that's why something like this is absolutely invaluable to have this mosaic or this network of sites to communicate and share and really advance whether it's education, science, etc. So there's a paper that came out, I don't know, it's pretty old now, maybe 10 years, about just how the fish assemblages are placed within the river, or how they habituate the river. And there's some that are river wide, there are some that are contained to the upper reaches, some that are contained to the lower reaches. But you know, I don't have a good sense of the lower reaches or the upper reaches. I know the middle reaches because that's where I am. So we're really dependent upon each other to communicate and share to advance our true understanding of this system. And so there's so much scientific value in having these pieces of the puzzle fit together.
Chris, do you know of any other place in North America that would have the potential of having 25, 30 research stations on the same river?
You know, the upper Mississippi has a network of field stations, but they're like 7 or 8. And so that's a model. There's a model on Lake Erie, and the name escapes me now, but it's not necessarily sites, it's organizations, nonprofits and universities and some communities, some municipalities, and they have a great network of people that do a lot of programs. I'll share that link. But this would be pretty unique. I think the physical structures has a lot of appeal. Like people can relate to that. They're tangible, concrete, and historic. And they're also very appealing, I think, visually. But whether or not each lock house can be restored, that is a lot of money and it's a lot of maintenance. Just getting them publicly available for accessibility, I think, would be a really good first step. So in other words, this can be phased in a number of ways that would be useful right at each phase. It wouldn't be like wait till the end to really reap the benefits. Just kind of getting them secured, maintained. And the other thing is, you know, you have a great committee here, but you probably want to, or we probably want to identify champions for each one of those lock houses.
Oh, for sure.
Within the local. And we might think lock house 33 or 32 is the best one ideally, but if 32 has the champion and 33 is sort of orphaned, we go with 32 for practical reasons. So some of this is theoretical arguments on which lock house might be best until you start to see who's going to come step forward, just like those people down in Illinois. That is a labor of love. It's their life, and that's what's maintained it. And, you know, hopefully we'll have some external support because you can't rest on, you know, individuals long term, but you certainly need somebody to pick up the banner for those local spots.
Oh, you are 100% for sure. And so there's lots of work to do in front of us. That's all we had for the agenda. I had this number 8 on here. And that is this recreational video series. Jerry Schulte, who used to be with Orsenko, now as a safety guy, did a wonderful piece on this locking through current locks. I put the link there, and he's asked for any advice or any comments. I just put that on there. Well, that's all I have. Mr. Willis, you've been quiet. Is there anything you'd like to say in reflection? What do you think of the work so far?
On mute. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine.
Okay, I had to go from the cell phone to my computer after I got home, and sorry for all that. And I'm not a wizard on this by any means. But the Corps of Engineers, and this is, I had to deal with 7 districts at one time. And, I can still remember when they closed out all the district historians and they, I can imagine how you would feel about that. And they haven't been too kind to their own history, to be honest with you. I guess I can say that now since I'm retired. They kind of turn their back on keeping track of things, even in terms of their own history. So that's not to say that you can't get something done, but it's a hierarchy which, in terms of the military aspect, changes every 3 to 4 years, or less sometimes. When you're talking about a division engineer who's usually a 1-star. So you can get in there, and if you get the right ear, you can do well. But it's, they're driven by, they have long-term maintenance programs that are driven by a political aspects. And funding that is we used to go through an awful lot at the end of the year. So I guess what I'm saying is I can see where you might be frustrated with their history and their legacy, so to speak, where there should be more continuity. I agree with you 100%. And having said all that, that's something that you got me thinking about when you made a couple comments. I used to be in the middle of all that, and that's why I don't have any hair on top of my head right now. But as far as lock houses go, just the ones that I'm familiar with, I think, like at Leavenworth, I remember one time going down there, and the powerhouse is still there. It's a structure. Now I'm talking about some years ago. I don't know what the situation.
Oh, the powerhouse is still there.
Okay, the powerhouse is still there. Those structures were built very well, and not that it wouldn't take money to get them going, but in terms of an interpretive center, yes. Typically, they're really nice, and what it looks like at Shiloh, for example, or some of the nice places. But and I understand that John supplied a 1930s version, which or an old map of where the original Ohio River projects were from the original canalization. So I have some information like that as well. What I would add to this conversation that I have some information on is that when you look at the old navigation charts, and this is going back even before canalization, there were a lot of very old homes, which are very old right now, but they've become bed and breakfasts. But they were where the old steamboats stopped. And we're not talking about pools now, but we're talking about properties that are owned by people who certainly have some historical sense. And I don't have a good handle on that, but maybe that should be part of the mix. I don't know. But you're going back to some older history, but you have some maps that show where some of these old stop-off places were even before canalization.
Well, that was one of the projects that Chuck Parrish and I did below Louisville, is that we went down and visited probably 40 steamboat stops and some of the houses, and our park district actually has created, adopted one of those houses, and now it's a park, and it was one of the historic steamboat spots. And so that's something that he would have enjoyed doing, sure, for the whole river.
Yeah, I miss him, but I had to mention, I'm glad you mentioned his name. Anyway, what do I have to add? That's it. And on the Kentucky River, I do have all of the, if that's part of this discussion still, the Kentucky River lock houses?
Well, yeah, Pat Hanks was going to join us, and they are very concerned with that lock house number 1, but also, and then the next one that they really talked a lot about was number 5. But there's just a variety of them on that Kentucky River that would just be great.
They are some, I mean, when I started with the Corps, we were still maintaining all the way up to Beattyville at 14. So I've been inside just about all of those locks. And the thing that I would bring up here is, back when Cincinnati was a district and the Kentucky was part of their realm, the Kentucky River, they had a fleet, and they had at Lock 4, just next to Frankfort, on the right descending bank, there was a Devane repair base, and that has been renovated. I don't know a lot about it. I do know that the grounds have been taken care of, and at one point the Corps was involved in taking care of soil there, because it was where they took the ship, all of the equipment out in those days, lead-based paint and all that. So they had to go through a cleansing there. But anyway, that is, I don't know what the current situation is there, but it seems to me that's up and it's been taken care of, and that would lend itself to an interpretive area if they're not already doing that. But and that's in a beautiful location.
Where in Frankfurt is that?
It's right across from the basically Frankfurt. On the, in other words, the river goes through very close to the city. And if you think about the right descending bank and the dam at Lock 4, it's right across from Frankfurt. Right across from Frankfurt. Beautiful location. In fact, there's a little restaurant on the river that there used to be a small mill right there, which connected on the left descending bank to the dam there.
The fish restaurant, right?
There's a fish restaurant, correct. That was one of my stopping places.
Yep, I have been there. I have a friend, KSU had a large grant that they had a Kentucky River education program, and they bought a 40-foot long cabin sort of pontoon boat and takes kids out, and that's right downstream of there, I think.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Kentucky is a beautiful river. But anyway, that site, I've wondered about that, and I don't know, something like that you might be latch on to, get the right people, and just it may be there for you for an interpretive center for sure, because they have, I think the buildings are in pretty good shape still, and a lot of history at Lock 4. I was originally part of the locks that were built before Civil War. The early development in the Kentucky River. I think the first 5 were state built. So anyway, I mean, what else can I add? I'm going down memory lane on you here, so you need to cut me off. But some of the sites, I do have an access map, by the way, to the Kentucky River sites, and that would be helpful if you wanted to check some of them out. But there are some just unbelievably beautiful sites there. And you said you made a trip down the river, so like Lock 11 and the, I mean, you go on and on with all those. So anyway, I'm getting a little long-winded here.
Oh, no, not at all, not at all. I did paddle. I did that KR 255, and so I carried around every single one of those dams. It was a challenge.
Absolutely.
I love that idea of Lock House 4. I'm going to go visit my friends in Frankfurt again, and I think part of this whole thing is the Kentucky tourism system. Because they do so much with the Ohio River and the Kentucky River, and having a base in Frankfurt, like an interpretive center, would be an interesting opportunity.
There's so many. Irvine at Lock 4, let's see, Irvine was Lock 12, I think. Irvine, Kentucky. A little town right on the river, and there's a lock there, park right next to it. You know, there's some potential there. I think you have a small town administration that, you know, gets a little help. But anyway, yeah.
But we'll just have 1,250 miles when we add both instead of just the 1,000 of the Ohio River.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you look at the Muskingum and what they've done, and then you look at the Ohio, there's a case of two different rivers, huh?
And have you been up there, Chris, to the Muskingum?
You know, I purposely would have meetings right there at that old hotel, you know, where the Muskingum comes into the Ohio. You know, I can't remember the name of it.
We've stayed
Or
there a
we'd
couple
sometime-
times. It's a very nice hotel.
Yes, it is. A lot of history there too, you know, amazing history. But you know, what they've done with the Muskingum River is just, I guess, it's wonderful.
Yeah, they made a
Wonderful.
state park of the whole thing.
Yes, they did. Yeah. And I mean, I would love to paddle that river, but I just haven't been able to. But if you look at the locks, this is something you may, you know, I always take a look at the structures. I've been to a couple of them. They actually follow the design criteria from the original. In other words, they have the huge wooden timbers to make the miter point and things like that. It's a very expensive deal, but it's like the original locks were built, like the Kentucky locks were built, you know, with the yellow poplar and white oak. So it's, yeah, interesting.
Well, you know, it's seeing that you like to talk, I have another question. I have done some research on our locks, and it turns out the U.S. Army sent people to France to study lock technology. You know
Sure.
where in France, and have you been sent to France to study this?
I've made a couple presentations over there, actually. One, if I go back, let's see, Lyon, you know, the two, the Saône and the Seine come together at Lyon, France, however you pronounce it. So you could find out, PIANC, you know, the International Organization for Navigation, would be a place where you find that out. Now, you know, the European system, if you want to call it that, because of all the countries involved, it makes our system look like an interstate highway compared to a bunch of dirt roads. You know, I mean, that's a pretty crude way of putting it, but they have. The French were very early developers of all kinds of great engineering. I mean, they're unbelievable. You know, our original canalization was mostly French engineering.
Well, if we ever do have a network of lock houses, maybe you could take all of us on a trip to France.
If you could fund it, I'd take you. No, I still have some contacts over there, but you know.
With that, we got to go.
Okay, got you. Sorry for.
Oh, no, thank
No,
you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting. And I'm glad to hear Chuck's name too. I had a chance to,
You knew Chuck then, huh?
yeah, for sure. Take care, everyone. Thanks, David.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.